Ah! Woo! Okay. You know how I get sometimes. The fire, the I don't know what you want to call it, but I do say the hate is real. Nothing to motivate a express lane, a sci-fi express lane, like a little bit of hate, you know. That's what I'm gonna call it. You know, we call hate any type of comment that we feel is negative, that's sort of unsubstantiated, you know, made by people that don't necessarily aren't thinking critical at the time. So somebody said, not any of my students or anybody like that, but I think somebody in a comic book store, it might be, I'm gonna put it on comic book people, or at least this on a comic book person. Somebody said, you too old to write sci-fi, or you too old to write, right? And I don't think I've ever thought that, okay? I am impatient about being successful. I do question how long I've been chasing these dreams, you know, of blowing up, you know, and they've come in stages, because I didn't really see myself as an artist in high school, right? And I didn't see myself as a what do you call it, artist until later. So my feelings of blowing up were different, you know, until maybe 10 years ago, maybe after Gold Digger Killer, right? I started thinking that, oh shoot, I'm gonna blow up as an artist. But I do think I wanted to be economically independent. I wanted to be secure. I wanted to have a big opportunity, and that's been something since high school, you know. It really turned up after college, because, you know, I wasn't really expecting to blow up before I graduated college. But that's been a long time. I graduated college in 1990, but it was December 89, you know. So that's a long time ago. However, as a writer, a science fiction writer, shoot, at 50, going on 55, I feel like I'm hitting my prime. You know, as a science fiction writer, when I first started writing science fiction, I went to a couple of science fiction conventions in Florida, and I remember dudes were so old, they were in walkers and wheelchairs, and gray beards, gray hair, no lie. Thank God a lot of them are still alive now, but yikes. I you know, I go to a couple of science fiction conventions, and, you know, that was the norm. As far north as Boston, and I mean, it's still the norm. You know, science fiction writers today are old. Now, you do have some young science fiction writers, you know what I'm saying? No doubt. You do have some young science fiction writers, and also the Golden Age writers, the ones that wrote in the 60s and the 70s, they weren't in their 60s and 70s either. So I don't know when that gap, you know, took place, you know, but I do know there's a lot of the science fiction writers that are out now are knocking it out the box. And these dudes is not Twilight old, but they're in their 50s and 60s. And I'm talking about like Jonathan Mayberry, who's, you know, 100 books down, right? Still banging out new storylines. Timothy Zahn, you know, he's taken over the Star Wars mantle with his gosh, I forgot the name of his character, the heir to the Empire, but the blue guy, he's gonna kill me. But anyway, you know, Eric, oh God, the one who does 1604, and he asked me to be in an anthology. But, you know, there's a whole bunch of science fiction writers that's still going on, and I'm telling you, 50 and up is the 50s and 60s is a banging age for science fiction writers. I'm also going to say there's a lot that's probably still in their 70s, you know, that I'm not knowing the name of. You know, some of the guys that I might have already named might be in their 70s. I don't know. I'm putting their ages out there, but I will say, when it comes to science fiction writers, there's an element that age provides you with that is not really necessary in writing mystery, drama, and things like that. I think because in science fiction, you're already not always, but you're dealing with a different time period. So many times the future, you know, and speculating about the future with anything, not just writing, but any type of futuristic speculation, the more history you have, the more you can pull from to speculate about, whether it's in the field of engineering, medicine, business, whatever. You know the history, trends repeat themselves, and you also know what was done before. So with science fiction writing, that really helps, you know. So many times science fiction writers are not writing in the present. And if they're present stories, there's an element of, I don't know if that has happened yet. This may happen. Let's replay this. So it's kind of the only genre where age works on your side, you know. And I know, like, a lot of people want to get into these new millennial elements, you know, maybe the LGBT things, the diversity trends, make them think that young people are needed to write these things, possibly, you know, maybe with young adult fiction, you know what I'm saying? Young adult fiction, because young adult fiction is not necessarily a science fictional scenario. Young adult fiction is more or less adolescent stories set in a science fantasy world, because to really even deal with science fiction as, you know, Philip K. Dick, and I'm going to defer to him, and my man Stephen Barnes, I'll refer to both of them, suggest it's not really a young adult conversation, right? So for young adults, they're still learning the world that we live in. So to introduce to them something like Logan's Run or Soylent Green, you know, or Planet of the Apes, you know, it's not, you know, it's nothing really, it doesn't hit them as hard as it would somebody 30, 40 and older, because they've got a chance to get to see the world. They've got a chance to see what's problematic in the world. They've got a chance to see the value of today's world, and then to speculate about all of that changing or how all of that may not last. Sheesh. But for a 14-year-old, 15-year-old young adult reader, they don't even have a value of the world yet. That's why, you know, it's crazy for them to have certain freedoms like driving, carrying guns, and doing drugs, because they don't really value. They don't have enough years and experience to value what we have, to value it enough to not mess over it and destroy it. So the readers are even important to have to be a little bit of an age in order to appreciate it. So when you're writing for young adults, you don't have to involve as much science, not, you know, and the reason why that is, a lot of them don't even understand the existing science for you to throw some futuristic speculation at them. Now, I ain't hating on it totally, because I do think there's something redeeming and useful in young adult science fiction readers, or young adults in general, right? And that is, a lot of them have free imaginations. Part of the speculation part that's hard for older people naturally, until you learn how to learn some techniques, is freeing up your imagination. You know what I'm saying? I experienced a little bit of that. One of my favorite, I'm gonna say favorite. One of my favorite persons that's a science fiction writer. Because I'm not gonna say I loved all of his books. I didn't read all of his books, but gosh, and I'm gonna forget his name. He's from South Florida. I mean, he's from Florida, and he wrote different space books. It almost reminds you of The Expanse, and his books would be called Venus, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, and he named them. He had a series where he named each planet, and he just died last year or a year before, in the beginning part of COVID. And I actually think COVID took him out. But anyway, and I'll get his name. I can't remember it. Anyway, he had a funny sense of humor with his science fiction speculation. And to be honest, a lot of great science fiction comes from humoristic speculation. Maybe I'll do a whole video on science fiction, humor in science fiction. But you know, many jokes, as you see by even people like Dave Chappelle, George Carlin, I don't even say Paul Mooney. They have an intellectual angle to them. And science fiction is capable of, benefits from the same thought. It benefits from the same thought community. And that is a sarcastic, humoristic approach to things. You know, you almost want to think Starship Troopers, but the Starship Troopers movie that you saw was really not what the book was. However, the world that was portrayed in the movie was the Hinland world, and that was sort of a humoristic approach. However, Ben Bova, that's my man from Florida, he embraced a humoristic approach to writing his science fiction. And I remember he did a short story called about somebody farting in their spacesuit when they went to Mars. And it was hilarious, but it was a science fiction probability that even NASA has speculated about in terms of what to do with expelled carbon from humans inside a contained spacesuit. And he had worked in NASA, right? He had worked or studied it. I'm not going to put his resume out there. He had studied it, and he knew that was one of their speculations and one of the things that they were trying to deal with. So he wrote a story about it. So for me, that may not be something that you gear towards a young adult audience, but as a science fiction writer, you're thinking so hard on deep questions. Sometimes, you have to sit back and say, let me talk to a child. Let me think like a child a little bit to come up with these ideas and speculations. And sometimes when you talk to children, they ask some really fundamental questions. They're not stupid questions, but they're fundamental questions. You'd be like, wait a minute, that whole thing could be something. So, I don't know. I do think age has an impact on science fiction writing, but I don't think it's a negative impact. I also look at, when I first thought of what I was going to talk about on this blog, I said, dang, I'm going to deal with all these young people that are writing comic books and comic book speculation. And then I was like, man, listen, I haven't even touched on them as much as I touched on, being an older science fiction writer. But I do think young writers of comic books may not be thinking as deep as science fiction writers or writers like me who write comic books and science fiction because they're younger. and they're still absorbing the value of the world today. They may not have thought as much about losing it. They may not write about the post-apocalypse through war. Maybe the war got them, but food shortages, change of governmental status, some of those things they may not have, unless they've been activists, but we're in a very active political world, so people are thinking of a lot of different things. But here's the end. I definitely don't think age has a negative impact on science fiction writing. I actually think it's the positive outweigh the negative. All right, anyway, like, subscribe, share, and of course, comment. But fully like, because I'm still not at, even 500 likes. My views hover around 30, 40. I get most of my views from Facebook. I love the likes. I don't get too many dislikes, so that's good. Shares, feel free to share. I don't even know if I get tracked for those when they share it from YouTube. And then comment. I may get 1 or 2 comments, man. I really appreciate the comments that I get. So thank you very much. Enjoy the day.